Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
I'm with Professor Barnett Rubin with the Center on International Cooperation at New York University, a very well-known analyst on Afghanistan, Pakistan. You've worked with the State Department for many years and with the UN. Barney, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you very much, Jay.
My first question to you is about the elections that have just taken place on the weekend on October 20th in Afghanistan. What's your take on that?
I think that the elections illustrate a broader point about Afghan society now, which is that the population has changed, at least the urban population,
right,
part that has access to foreign aid and so on, has really changed and developed its mentality. So you saw very high turnout in some areas.
And a lot of women also coming out to vote.
Yes, and people willing to wait in line for hours, willing to take risks, even if a bomb went off nearby, they didn't move.
Right.
But at the same time, there are two main, very serious problems. One is, of course, the violence that still takes place because the government doesn't control the country. But even perhaps more troubling is the malfunction of the electoral system, of the electoral machinery, because not only were they not able to to vote in many remote districts that were under Taliban control, there were some districts right in Kabul, in the capital city, where they did not get the electoral materials. They opened hours and hours late, and people lost the right to exercise their franchise.
So do you think this is, what does this do to President Ashraf Ghani? Is this a black mark against his presidency?
Well, some people would say that because he appointed the members of the Electoral Commission, and the appointment of the Electoral Commission was very politicized and controversial for some time.
Right.
However, that doesn't prove that if someone else were there, it would have been better.
Any better, yeah. But so, tell me, the police chief of Kandahar, you talked about violence and how that's still engulfing the country for so many years. The police chief in Kandahar, Abdul Raziq, was assassinated just 3 days before the elections. And he was somebody who was the strong guy who kept the Taliban, held it off. What do you make of that? Why do you think that happened?
Well, he was, of course, one of the Taliban's major targets, because the views about Raziq are very polarized in Kandahar, because the people who are living in the city who belong to tribal groups that are like part of the government coalition, they really look up to him, and he succeeded in securing the city. But he used extremely brutal methods of summary execution and torture and so on.
But some would say you would need to do that in a tough town like Kandahar.
Well, to Raziq's credit, I have to say that the way he did it was successful, because there are many people who commit all kinds of brutalities and yet they don't accomplish anything. He committed many brutalities, but he accomplished something. But of course, he was the linchpin of stability in that area and in southern Afghanistan, so naturally he was a target of the Taliban and their backers in Pakistan.
Now you say that, and Raziq was also very critical of Pakistan's, what he called Pakistan's interference in Afghanistan. Do you agree?
Well, I wouldn't say he was critical. I would say he was actively fighting against it.
So do you agree with that? Do you believe that that Pakistan is still interfering in the political processes and otherwise in Afghanistan?
Of course. I mean, I've said that for years, and it's. The Afghan Taliban have their headquarters in Pakistan. They operate freely. Pakistan gives various reasons for that, why they treat them differently from the Pakistani Taliban. But that is, and I'm not going to repeat the reasons that they give. I'm not here to justify what they're doing, but that's a fact. And I think.
But where do they have their headquarters? Where does the Afghan Taliban have their headquarters?
Well, their main leadership is in around the city of Quetta, or in between Quetta and Chaman. And then they also have quite a bit of their leadership is in Karachi, and they have specific shuras in Peshawar and used to be in North Waziristan. I think it's moved now. But and then there are settlements of Afghan refugees in all those areas, and Taliban are organized among those people.
So and you also saw, Barney, that Mullah Baradar, one of the founders of the Taliban, has been released by the Pakistanis from a jail in Karachi. What is the significance of that?
That's been a demand of the Afghan government for a very long time, and also of the Taliban themselves,
Right.
to have him released from prison. Of course, under President Karzai, it was particularly strong demand from the Afghan government because he is from the same tribe as Mullah Baradar, and in fact, Mullah, they had some family relations of some kind, and had been in contact actually at one time when the Americans because Mullah Baradar had actually written to President Karzai in 2002 to say that he would support his government, and then the Americans came after him with special forces, and that's when he went to Pakistan.
Okay.
Of course, Mullah Baradar was arrested in early 2010 in Pakistan in an joint operation between CIA and ISI. And what actually happened is still very highly disputed. I'm not sure that this is true, but it was widely interpreted as the ISI acting against Mullah Baradar because he had been engaged in some talks with the Afghan government.
Right.
So whether that's true or not, that is what people believe.
What do you believe?
Honestly, I've looked into it. I've heard the CIA side of the story, and I heard the other side of the story. I'm not sure what to believe. But my point is, what it means now is that because many people believe that, releasing him is a confidence-building measure.
On the part of the Pakistanis?
Yes, but also the Americans, because I have to believe that Zalmay Khalilzad, the special representative for the peace process of the U.S. State Department, must have discussed that with the Taliban in Doha,
right,
Qatar, when he was there.
So does that mean that since he's been in a Pakistani jail for about 8 years now, he was arrested in 2010, so the Pakistanis would have control over him?
I actually, when I hear his mental health is very poor condition, and in any case, the Taliban have a strict rule that once someone is in prison, he no longer represents them. So he doesn't have. He'll be respected as a person, but he won't be able to. He won't play a formal role. We'll see. There's been a lot of speculation about what his views are. I really don't know. Obviously, when he was a captive in Pakistan, he was not free to speak his mind.
Sure.
I don't even know yet where he is going to live, whether he will go live in Pakistan or whether he will go back to Afghanistan.
So it's a symbolic gesture, the release of Mullah Baradar?
It's a confidence-building measure.
Okay. But he will not play a key role in the peace process between the Taliban and the Afghan government?
I don't think so. I hear his health is not good enough for that.
Right. So tell me a little bit about this incipient peace process. The Americans want it. You've been involved with it in some way or the other over the decades. You know Afghanistan so well. But in its current incarnation, what is the peace process about? Well,
first, let me just, if I may, kind of correct something you said, which is the Americans want it. Actually, while there's some disagreements about how to conduct it, the idea of a peace process with the Taliban is shared by the government of Afghanistan, the government of the United States, and all the regional governments except perhaps India.
Except India?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I'll have to ask you why.
But why do you think India is not keen on it?
Well, first, do you agree with that I'm...
No, I don't know. I mean, you're the expert here.
Well, I think... India had the very bad experiences with the Taliban, the hijacking of the Indian airliner, Lashkar-e-Taiba being trained there and so on. And also, in the past 5 to 10 years, the Taliban have actually made some diplomatic outreach to the countries of the region and have tried to enter the United States to convince them that they're not a threat to them, their interest is only in Afghanistan.
Including to India?
No, but you see, because they're headquartered in Pakistan, it's impossible for them to talk to India. Because if they talk to India, they would be punished by Pakistanis. So I don't know if they want to or not, but in any case, it would be impossible under current circumstances.
But they've reached out to all the other regional players?
Yes. I mean, for all I know, they reached out to India, but I haven't heard of it.
So Russia, they would have reached out to the Central Asian states, to Russia?
Well, they recently visited Uzbekistan.
Yes.
The Russians have said they have met them several times.
And the Russians just wanted to have a dialogue a few weeks ago in Moscow.
Yes.
But anyway, that didn't take place.
Yes.
So to come back to the peace process, you were saying that the governments of Afghanistan, of the US, of Pakistan as well, the Pakistanis want the peace process too?
Yes, but you understand that doesn't mean they want the same thing. It means everyone would like the fighting to end in a way that is advantageous for them. That's why the fighting continues.
So what does America want? Do they want to get out of Afghanistan? It's been 17 years.
Yes. Of course, when we say the United States, we have to distinguish between different actors. I would say the overall conditioning factor is that there is very little political support for staying and fighting in Afghanistan. Though there is a kind of a feeling by leaders that they don't want to take the risk of suffering something that looks like a defeat. But there's no real support for staying there. The military has institutional interests in trying to continue to do that and so on. President Trump does not want to be in Afghanistan. He has a long-standing position from long before he became a candidate that he thinks the war in Afghanistan is a waste of time. And even though he made this speech in August 2017 and said he was recommitting something different from Obama, the fact is he recently said, his instinct was to pull out, and now he wishes he'd followed his instinct.
What about the Pakistanis? What do they want?
They want the United States out of there because the United States has become increasingly aligned with India. So from their point of view, when they say the Indian threat, it's not exactly the Indian threat, it's the US plus Indian threat. If the US were not there, they wouldn't face much of an Indian threat or even imagine an Indian threat from Afghanistan. So, but of course, all the countries of the region want the United States to leave eventually, but none of them want the United States to leave now. They want it to leave through a negotiated process that leaves some stability behind. And the problem is nobody, not the United States, not any of these countries that want the United States to leave, has proposed a vision of how Afghanistan would survive after that.
Right.
So that is really the most difficult question for the peace process. Who pays for the Afghan state? Who pays for the army? Who takes care of what are the security relations? Because Afghanistan is dependent, when an outside power steps in to support the government, that immediately threatens other powers.
But do you think India should play a more active role in the peace process in terms of, say, funding? I'm talking about the Afghanistan government, helping the Afghans, not just economically, but also in military terms, perhaps, much more than they're doing today.
Look, if the American military with 100,000 troops was not successful militarily in Afghanistan, having some more military aid from India is not going to help. It's not, the problem is not military. The problem is political. I would say...
What's the political problem?
The political problem is that there is no, that in order, the current government of Afghanistan is almost entirely funded by the United States. It is propped up or is supported by an American military presence.
Right.
And the United States has bad and deteriorating relations with all the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan. Not with India. Well, maybe they're deteriorating a little bit now, but they're much better than with the other countries, but with Pakistan, Iran, Russia, and China.
And what does Pakistan want?
As I said, Pakistan wants the United States out of there because the United States is aligned with India.
So what? What's wrong with that?
Well, they had their... Look, I'm not saying I agree with them, but this is the threat perception. This is the threat perception of the military. I have a lot of experience when I explain what Pakistan or Taliban want. Then because I make it sound plausible, they think I'm agreeing with them. So, okay. But look, the Pakistan military went through a very traumatic experience in 1971, and they saw that...
With the breakup of Pakistan into Bangladesh.
Yes, and as they understand it, that's because there was an ethnic conflict within Pakistan, which India took advantage of and intervened, enabling Bangladesh to become independent. So
that fear of the breakup of Pakistan, we are looking at again in 2018, nearly 50 years later?
They actually believe that, I don't believe, but they believe that India is actively doing that by supporting the insurgency in Balochistan, by supporting Pakistani Taliban, and so on.
But what's that got to do with Afghanistan?
Well, because those groups have sanctuaries and camps inside Afghanistan. Because the only way that India has contact with Balochistan or through, they believe, or with the Pashtun terrorists or whatever, is through their presence in Afghanistan.
But it seems to me that the Pakistanis are not willing to acknowledge that Afghanistan is an independent, sovereign country and can and should have independent relations with third countries. They still seem to look at Afghanistan in a different light.
Well, look, India is not happy that the Chinese now control a port in Sri Lanka, right? Although it is certainly in the right of Sri Lanka to have the Chinese buy a port there. It's their sovereign right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you're not sending guerrillas in there, but you find that possibly a threat to you.
Sure.
So I'm not just, but just. I mean, what you say is they don't act as if Afghanistan is a sovereign country. Yes, but on the other hand, Afghanistan also doesn't recognize the border with them, and there's a long history of Afghanistan. The Durand Line of also supporting militias on the other side. Now, I'm not saying it's the same, but there is a problem between those two countries, historic.
So how does the peace process address that, or how does it end it? The peace process, obviously you're trying to bring peace to Afghanistan.
Well, I think the key to it is the questions I mentioned before. If the key countries of the region who all have an interest in a stable Afghanistan, and that interest is now stronger than ever before because of the economic growth of India and the economic growth of China, so that it now, because both of those growing mega economies need to build infrastructure and connectivity in that region, and the instability of Afghanistan is an obstacle to that. They have that common interest in making Afghanistan stable. Ultimately, it's their choice, or it's not exactly a choice, but we don't know what will happen. On the one hand, they might continue competing and have a new version of the so-called Great Game.
Right.
But, after the Wuhan summit, they announced one of the results of the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping was that India and China would try to cooperate on Afghanistan, first in small ways and then possibly in larger ways. Uzbekistan has asked India and China to work together on building a railroad from Uzbekistan through northern Afghanistan to Iran. That's a very big project. Mm-hmm. And I think that that the prospect of Indian-Chinese cooperation in Afghanistan, which is just nascent now, and I know it goes against conventional wisdom in India, but
you think it's a good thing?
Yes, I think it's the best thing that would stabilize the region. Those are the two major powers.
But wouldn't the Pakistanis, who are so close to China, would they not be nervous about an incipient relationship between India and China?
They very well might be, but Pakistan does not control China.
So the question is about China and Pakistan. Do you think that the Pakistanis would be worried that India and China are now perhaps going to begin to cooperate in Afghanistan?
Well, some Pakistanis would worry about it, and some would see that it's a great economic opportunity for Pakistan. But the basic reality is that Pakistan does not have leverage over China. It's the other way around. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen any protests coming from Pakistan about the prospects of China-India cooperation. And what I understand from, at least from the Chinese and from some Indians, is that the initiative is mainly coming from the Chinese. Because it's part of their vision connected with the Belt and Road and so on. And they would like India to join with that. And they're looking at ways to assuage India's concerns about the route of CPEC. That's part of course, this idea.
So could China then be a key in the pacification of this part of the world?
Well, it has to be, because it's the largest economy in the region. But of course, India is a country that's the second largest in the region.
But what would the Americans say if the Chinese expand their influence towards Afghanistan? After all, the Americans have paid not only in money but in blood.
They didn't go to Afghanistan in order to stop Chinese influence. They went there to wipe out Al-Qaeda, which they did. Mm-hmm.
And they stayed on.
Yes, but you see the trend. When the United States went into Afghanistan militarily in 2001, the economy of the United States was 70% larger than the combined economies of Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China. Mm-hmm. I'm leaving out India. Today, the combined economies of those four countries are 50% larger than the economy of the United States. Okay, so we cannot expect the balance of power and influence to remain the same.
That's right.
It's going to change.
But does Trump recognize that?
Trump, no, but that doesn't matter because Trump is just there for a little while, and then he will leave. At the moment, Trump he is neither trying to assert American dominance in the region, because he's not interested in that. He just wants, I don't know what he wants. He wants America first, advantageous trade relations. He doesn't think in terms of geopolitics.
What are the three things that you would suggest that Afghanistan's neighbors and the big powers undertake, the key steps that they undertake so that peace returns to Afghanistan? Well,
first, let me say, my role is not to tell the largest countries in the world how to pursue their interests.
No, as an analyst, what do you think? What do you think people should do?
As an analyst, what I see is that despite the many conflicts between India and China, they have also a potential common interest in the stability of the whole region, because economics is not a zero-sum game, right? Just because if China grows, it doesn't mean India becomes smaller. The Chinese economy and the Indian economy are both growing at the same time, and the volume of trade between them is growing rapidly. The volume of investment is growing rapidly. If China is building Belt and Road, that doesn't mean that is not at the expense of Chabahar. Chabahar is not necessarily at the expense of Gwadar. The Chinese have told me, and they've told some Indians, that they could see them as sister ports. Even, if they build this railroad across northern Afghanistan, we were talking about 10 years from now or something, and it goes to Iran, then China will have access to Chabahar, not just to Gwadar. And the security situation, at least now, who knows in 10 years, is better around Chabahar than it is around Gwadar.
So you think peace could break out very soon?
No, I'm not predicting that will happen. There are a lot, tremendous obstacles. What I'm saying is, you didn't ask me to predict. You said, what do I think countries should do?
Right.
I'm suggesting where the opportunities are to work on that. Now, if I had to take my money for my retirement and invest it in a stable Afghanistan fund or an unstable Afghanistan fund, I'm afraid, regretfully, I would have to invest it in the unstable Afghanistan fund. But I'm not working for that goal. I'm working for the other one.
Barnett Rubin, thank you so much for talking to The Print. For more news, views, and interviews, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, The Print. This is Jyoti Malhotra for The Print.